Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about issue number 2 of Cable, written by Fabian Nicieza. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoy this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. Now just to provide a recap, with the recent explosion of anti-mutant sentiments cultivated by Orcus in the wake of Krakoa's fall, mutants of today have never been more hunted or feared. However, while what remains of the X-Men are banding together to stand against Orcus and their associates, Nathan, aka Cable, has his eyes trained on a threat that no one else is prepared for, the Neocracy. Now as a soldier from the future, Cable has seen various timelines fall victim to the all-consuming forced assimilation of the Neocracy and knows that allowing the Neocracy to come to fruition would mean the end of not only mutant kind, but all other life on Earth as well. So with no one else to turn to, Cable recruits his younger self, Nate Summers. Now this allowed the two Cables to track down a lead to Parvenu Industries, whose research may one day give rise to the Neocracy if the two fail to destroy it first. However, their attempt to rid the world of the threat quickly went south when they encountered the lead scientist at Parvenu Industries. So with that said, this issue opens up with Kid Cable turned into solid stone. Now the reason behind this is because, unlike adult Cable, young Cable ran into battle a little too eager, and somehow managed to get caught by the Grey Gargoyle's ability, which turns whoever he touches into stone. But the good news is that just because he was turned into stone, didn't mean it's permanent, because in a matter of a few hours, young Nate should be back to normal as if nothing ever happened. So as the battle carried on, no matter how much the Grey Gargoyle tried, he was unable to manipulate older Cable's genetic structure due to his techno-organic virus. Now the reason why this was going on was because the transmuted virus reacts to the Gargoyle's touch, like an antibody's rallying to fight an infection. So with the Gargoyle's ability at bay, Cable assumed that the enemy would most likely switch to hand-to-hand combat. And considering his weight was half a ton, it would be in his best interest to avoid such scenarios. So with the battle at a temporary pause, Cable tells the Gargoyle that his work for Parvenu is really dangerous. But see, that is when the Gargoyle responds by saying the work he's doing may be dangerous, but is decades from reaching any kind of meaningful fruition. And the ironic part about this whole thing is, considering his history of work, this job is one of the only ones he had in a while that was perfectly legal. So with that said, Cable responded by saying, the DNA coding they have on all the superheroes might have been taken legally, but not ethically. And once Cable saw the Neocracy graffiti on the wall, he immediately made a decision to not wait for a potential threat to become a real one. So in order to prevent a bad future timeline, Cable decided to not allow the current one he is in from becoming corrupted. And the first step in preventing the future from becoming corrupted is by taking down future threats, and the current threat he is facing is humans, mutants, aliens, and Inhuman turning into one species, turning into Homo Unitus. So with that said, as the Gargoyle dashed into battle, Cable opened fire only to miss the incoming threat, for his target wasn't the Gargoyle but instead his work. So with everything he worked on completely destroyed in front of him, the Gargoyle rushed into action, and before Cable could react, the Gargoyle had our hero on the floor. So with the weight of the Gargoyle bearing down on Cable, Nathaniel had to rethink his actions, and in a stroke of genius, he decided to let his techno-organic virus free on his enemy. And like ants crawling over the Gargoyle's body, Cable's virus did the trick and converted the scientist back to his human form, ending the fight. So with the victory in hand, Cable took a seat and used his custom future AI to dig through Parvenu's databases, and once in, Cable's partner stumbled upon the name, Jonathan Chambers. So with a new lead discovered, Cable burned the lab to the ground and took his leave. Now, following that, we transition over the Parhead's headquarters, where we see a suited individual getting a briefing on the events that just went down. And upon hearing what happened, the man showed no concern about the mutant that was named to be hunting him. In fact, he ended up telling his assistant to notify Amanda about the company that is heading her way. So just as he predicted, both Cable and Nate made their way to the island in question, and after grabbing a quick bite to eat, the two started to scale the wall. Now, while the two navigate their way to the base itself, Cable gives the younger Cable a briefing on what to expect. We learned that Chambers was a theoretical geneticist, as well as a mutant, with the ability to turn pain and depressive emotions into energy. And during the time the legacy virus spread among mutants, Chambers used all the pain and depression to become supercharged. So of course, the X-Men went to investigate the situation and determined at the time that in his empowered state as Empyrean, Chambers' ability to ease the pain of the legacy victims outweighed his questionable nature and motives. But once Beast found the cure to the legacy virus, Chambers became a non-factor and faded away into the background, which is what brought the two Cables here today. So as the two approached the door, the older Cable kicked it in, only to see Chambers strung up to a machine, and by the looks of it, he'd been there for a very long time. And while he was up there, he was attached to some kind of psychic filter, which forced him to absorb pain and sadness on a global scale. Then the wires, that were attached to his body, converted that power into energy. So with that going on, the question that has to be asked is, where is this energy going? So with the former owner being strung up and used as a battery power supply, Cable took this opportunity to follow the power lines in order to see where the energy was going. And at that moment, he stumbled upon the nexus of all the power, and after further investigation, Cable learned that they had an inexhaustible, inexcusable, and seemingly inexplicable hoarding of DNA and energy samples. And the one thing they all had in common was that they are all from dozens of energy-based superhumans, which was key to bringing Neocracy evolutionary goals into fruition. For what Cable was seeing was the cauldron to their evolutionary leap. And then out of nowhere, Cable bodies started to act up and mutate before falling into the chasm. So, while all that was going on, we jumped over to the younger Cable calling out for his older counterpart only to be met by silence. So with confusion in the air, Nate mysteriously got blindsided by a mysterious red being that took control over his body. So with Nate completely immobilized, he stood a prisoner in his own body, as a voice called out to him. Now, with this body unable to move, Amanda Mueller, the Black Womb, the mother of tomorrow, walked out into the open. Because, for 150 years she has strived to achieve what finally lies in her grips right now. But despite the woman's appearance, young Cable was not deterred, for he asked her, "You and what army?" In which she replied by saying, "This army." And behind our young hero appeared Cyclops, Jean, Magneto, and the mighty Apocalypse. So with that said, this issue number 2 of Cable comes to an end. Now following the conclusion of this issue, I have to say that I was hoping that this story would play out just a little different. I understand that Cable usually deals with issues that are removed from the current story, but I would have preferred if for this one time they worked just a little harder on making this a part of the narrative. Now the reason why I say that is because while everyone else is dealing with an endgame threat, Cable's story, so far, feels like filler. Because when Cable fought against the Children of the Vault, the X-Men writing team took their time in building up his enemy, and near the conclusion of that arc, the team managed to bring the story full circle and tie it into the overall story with Orcus. But in this storyline, the villains feel like they are supposed to be strong, but instead come off as forced. Now following the conclusion of this issue, I have to express my disappointment with how this issue played out. Now, while Cable usually deals with issues that are separate from the main story, I had hoped that this time they could have made it a part of the narrative. Personally, this story feels like filler compared to the endgame threat that everyone else is dealing with. When Cable fought the Children of the Vault, the X-Men writing team had taken their time in building up the enemy, and by the end of the arc, they had tied it into the overall story with Orcus. However, in this storyline, the villains seem to be forced and not as strong as they are supposed to be. And given all the time travel usage in the rise of the powers of X, I would have thought Cable would be among those leading the charge. But instead, they have him dealing with an issue that the Dominion wouldn't allow to thrive if it was truly a big enough threat, like the Children. And speaking of the Children of the Vault, if you want to check out their full story, the video will be linked in the cards above. So with that out there, if you want to stay in the loop about any individual storyline, then how about you hop over to the playlist section down below or in the link cards above to get all caught up on the X-Men runs. So with that established, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next review.